Imagine this. A father and his son are standing in a monastery, of all places, surrounded by saints and sinners alike. The father is a buffoon, a drunkard, a man who has spent his life debauching women and stealing from the poor. The son is an atheist, an intellectual, a man who has spent his years in Europe cataloging the failures of the human art. They are not here to pray. They are here to settle a blood feud. And as the holy man looks at them, he does not offer a blessing. He does not offer forgiveness. He bows. He bows not to the Father, but to the Son. He bows to the suffering he sees in his future. And in that single gesture, Fyodor Dostoevsky drops a weight on your chest that you will never fully remove. This is the Brothers Karamazov. It is not a book. It is an autopsy of the soul performed while the patient is still screaming. The novel presents you with a family torn apart by one primal force, the murder of a father. But the corpse in this story is not just the body of Fyodor Pavlovich Karamazov. The corpse is God. The corpse is morality. The corpse is the very idea that life has any meaning at all. Dostoevsky shoves you into a courtroom and forces you to be the jury, not for a crime of patricide, but for the crime of existence itself. You are asked to decide, if there is no God, is everything permitted? And if everything is permitted, why shouldn't a son kill his father? Why shouldn't you take what you want? Why shouldn't the world burn? You've felt this tension, haven't you? You've stood at the edge of a decision, knowing the right thing to do, but feeling the intoxicating pull of the wrong one. You've wondered if your conscience is a voice from heaven, or just a scar from your childhood. You've looked at the sheer volume of suffering in the world, the tears of innocent children, the grinding poverty, the random cruelty of nature, and you've asked the question that hangs over this entire story like a guillotine blade. How can a loving God allow this? And if he allows it, is he worth believing in? Or worse, is he even there at all? Dostoevsky doesn't let you hide in easy answers. He creates Ivan Karamazov, the intellectual son, and gives him a voice so sharp, so logical, so devastatingly rational, that he becomes the mouthpiece for your own darkest doubts. Ivan doesn't just argue that God is dead. He argues that if God is dead, the entire moral framework of humanity collapses into dust. He returns his ticket to salvation. He says that the price of harmony, eternal peace bought with the suffering of a single tortured child, is too high. He refuses to accept the world built on the foundation of agony. And then, in the most dangerous move ever made in literature, Dostoevsky lets Ivan tell a story about the return of Christ to earth during the Spanish Inquisition. A story where the Grand Inquisitor, a cardinal who represents the power of the church, arrests Jesus and sentences him to be burned at the stake. And in that cell, the Inquisitor explains why humanity must reject Christ. He explains why freedom is a curse too heavy for weak humans to bear. He explains that mankind craves miracle, mystery, and authority, not the terrifying burden of free will. This is the central paradox of the Brothers Karamazov, the lock this book is the key to. The very thing that makes us human, our freedom to choose good or evil, might be the very thing that destroys us. And the thing we create to save us from that freedom, religion, law, ideology, might be the very thing that turns us into slaves. The book opens a door inside your mind. It forces you to look at the shadow self you keep locked away, the part of you that whispers that maybe your morality is just a social contract, maybe your faith is just a security blanket, and maybe, just maybe, if you were pushed hard enough, you would kill the thing that made you. But before you can look away, Dostoevsky grabs your chin and forces you to look deeper. He asks, if you are capable of that darkness, what are you capable of in the light? If this exploration of Dostoevsky's masterpiece stirred something in you, hit that subscribe button now, because we're about to descend even deeper into the human soul in the coming sections. And if you've ever wrestled with the question of faith versus doubt in your own life, drop a comment below with the word abyss, so we know we're walking this path together. You walk out of that monastery cell with the image of the bow burned into your mind, and you think you understand the problem. You think it's about faith versus doubt, God versus atheism, good versus evil. But Dostoevsky is not interested in such neat binaries. He drags you deeper into the muck of the human heart and performs an autopsy while you're still breathing. The hidden problem, the disease eating the Karamazov family, and by extension, your own life, is not the absence of God. It is the presence of a force so seductive, so rational, so utterly modern that you've probably already welcomed it into your own soul without noticing. It is called rational egoism, and it will kill you. Dostoevsky watched the intellectual movements of his time, the rise of nihilism, the worship of science, the belief that human beings were simply complex machines driven by self-interest, and he saw where they led. He saw young men and women convincing themselves that morality was a fairy tale, that compassion was weakness, that the only rational thing to do was to pursue your own desires with ruthless efficiency. He saw them constructing elaborate philosophical systems to justify the most ancient of sins, the belief that you are the center of the universe. Enter Dmitri Karamazov, the sensualist. He is the body. He lives entirely in his passions, his appetites, his desperate hunger for experience. He will ruin himself for a woman. He will humiliate himself for money. He feels everything too much, and he thinks too little. He is the man who wakes up in a gutter and wonders how he got there, even as he reaches for another bottle. You know him. You've been him. You've chased something you wanted, a person, a possession, a pleasure, with such single-minded intensity that you burned everything else down around you. And when the ashes cooled, you stood in the middle and asked, how did this happen? Enter Ivan Karamazov, the rationalist. He is the mind. He has built a fortress of logic around himself, a beautiful, gleaming structure of arguments and counter-arguments that proves beyond any doubt that nothing matters. He does not debauch himself in the streets like his brother. He debauches himself in his thoughts. He convinces himself that since there is no God, there is no sin. Since there is no sin, there is no guilt. Since there is no guilt, he is free. He is the intellectual who can argue the existence of evil with such brilliance that he forgets he is participating in it. You know him too. You've built your own fortresses. You've justified your betrayals with circumstances. You've explained away your cowardice with complexity. You've used reason not to find truth, but to escape it. And then there is Smerdyakov, the bastard. He is the ghost in the machine. He is the living embodiment of what happens when these two forces, raw desire and cold reason, collide without a soul to mediate them. Smerdyakov has watched his betters philosophize about murder while he quietly plans to commit one. He is the logical endpoint of a world without God. He listens to Ivan's arguments about everything being permitted, and he does not argue back. He simply nods, and then he acts. He becomes the knife that cuts through the family's pretensions. This is Dostoevsky's diagnosis. The modern soul is splitting apart. The body wants what it wants. The mind justifies what the body wants. And the soul, the part of you that might actually know right from wrong, is starved into silence, locked in the basement while the other two throw a party. You feel this split every day. You feel the pull towards something you know is destructive, and you feel your mind crafting the perfect excuse for why this time is different, why this exception is justified, why you deserve this one thing regardless of the cost. The disease is not that you are evil. The disease is that you have forgotten how to recognize good. You have outsourced your morality to systems, religion, politics, social media that tell you what to think instead of teaching you how to feel. You have become a creature of reaction, not reflection. You swing between guilt and justification, never landing in the place where true responsibility lives. Dostoevsky shows you this through the father, Fyodor Pavlovich. He is not a monster because he is cruel. He is a monster because he is empty. He has no internal compass. He performs emotion. He performs piety. He performs love. But underneath the performance, there is nothing. He is the warning. He is what you become when you live entirely on the surface, when you mistake sensation for meaning, when you let the world define you because you are too afraid to define yourself. And here is the terror. The murder that drives this story is not committed by one man. It is committed by all of them. Dmitri's rage, Ivan's philosophy, Smerdyakov's hand, and the father's own corrupt life, they all conspire to spill blood. Dostoevsky is telling you that evil is never solitary. It is a collaboration. It is the look you don't return, the argument you don't challenge, the truth you don't speak. It is the slow erosion of your own soul, one justification at a time, until one day you wake up and realize you've become the thing you once feared. But just as you begin to feel the weight of this diagnosis, just as you start to see the cracks in your own carefully constructed fortress, Dostoevsky leans in and whispers, "You think this is bad? You haven't seen what comes next. You haven't seen what happens when a soul truly believes there is no redemption. You haven't stood at the edge of the abyss and looked down. That is where we are going. That is the unseen consequence. You have seen the disease. You have watched the Karamazov family tear itself apart through raw desire and cold reason, through empty performance and quiet conspiracy. But Dostoevsky does not let you remain a spectator. He forces you to follow the infection outward, into the world these men have created. And what you find, there is not just a murdered father lying in a pool of blood. It is something far worse. It is a world where murder becomes logical, where betrayal becomes reasonable, where the worst crimes are committed not by monsters, but by men who have convinced themselves they are doing nothing wrong. This is the unseen consequence. This is what happens when the soul splits and the ghost in the machine takes control. Look first at Dmitri. He did not kill his father. His hands are clean of blood, but he stands in a courtroom accused of patricide, and the strange truth is that he deserves to be there. Not because he committed the act, but because he lived as if the act was inevitable. He spent months publicly threatening to kill his father. He beat him. He humiliated him. He roared through the streets like a force of nature, daring God or man to stop him. And when the murder finally happened, no one was surprised. Dmitri reaped what he had sown. His sin was not the murder itself, but the decades of lawless passion that made murder feel like the next logical step. He is guilty of a life that pointed toward this moment. And as you watch him in his cell, raging against the injustice of his conviction, you realize the deeper truth. We are all convicted by the lives we have lived long before any verdict is read. Now look at Ivan. He is free. He walks the streets while his brother rots in prison. But his freedom is a cage. The moment he learns that Smerdyakov actually committed the murder, that his philosophy was taken seriously, that his words became flesh, his mind begins to crack. He cannot bear the weight of his own logic made real. He descends into fever and hallucination. He is visited by a devil, a creature who is not a demon with horns and a tail, but a shabby, bored, middle-aged gentleman who speaks with Ivan's own voice and mocks him with his own doubts. This devil reminds Ivan of every cynical thought he ever had, every cruel joke he ever made, every justification he ever crafted. And Ivan cannot escape him because the devil lives inside him. He has become his own punishment. This is the consequence Dostoevsky wants you to feel in your bones. A world without God does not become a playground of freedom. It becomes a prison of the self. You are trapped in the echo chamber of your own mind, haunted by the ghost of every truth you suppressed, every conscience you silenced, every kindness you deemed irrational. You become Ivan, pacing in your room, arguing with a devil who knows all your secrets because he is made of them. And then there is the courtroom itself. Dostoevsky builds it as a mirror of the modern world. The lawyers do not seek truth. They seek victory. They perform for the crowd. They twist facts into narratives. They turn a man's life into a spectacle for public consumption. The spectators do not seek justice. They seek entertainment. They gossip. They judge. They consume the tragedy of the Karamazovs like a meal, and then move on to the next course. Sound familiar? You have sat in that courtroom. You have scrolled through the disasters of strangers and felt nothing but curiosity. You have watched families crumble on your screen and called it content. You have become the spectator, and in doing so, you have become part of the disease. But the deepest consequence, the one that cuts to the bone, is reserved for a child, a boy named Alyosha. He is not a Karamazov by blood, but he is destroyed by them nonetheless. Dmitri, in one of his fits of rage, humiliated Alyosha's father in public, and the boy, watching his father shamed, internalized the wound. He became sick with a guilt that was not his, carrying a weight no child should bear. He dies in this story, not by violence, but by the slow poison of a world where the strong devour the weak and call it nature. Dostoevsky places this child's death at the center of his novel for a reason. He is answering Ivan's argument about the suffering of children. Ivan said no cosmic harmony could justify one tortured child. And here, at the end, a child lies dying because of the Karamazov chaos. The question hangs in the air. Is there any redemption for a world that kills its children? Is there any hope for a family, for a species, that destroys its own future? You feel the weight of that question pressing down on you. You want an answer. You need a way out. And Dostoevsky, who has spent hundreds of pages dragging you through the darkness, finally offers you a path. But it is not the path you expect. It is not a system or a philosophy. It is not a proof or an argument. It is something far more fragile and far more powerful. It is the only thing that can save you from becoming Ivan or Dmitri or the ghost in the machine. It is the soul's last defense against the abyss. You've just seen how a world without anchor becomes a prison of the self. If this is hitting home, smash that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the prescription, because Part 4 reveals the only cure Dostoevsky offers for the disease we've uncovered. And tell us in the comments, which Karamazov brother do you see most in yourself? The passion of Dmitri, the reason of Ivan, or the soul of Alyosha? You have walked through the valley of the shadow. You have seen the murder, the madness, the dying child. You have felt the weight of a world where reason justifies cruelty and passion destroys innocence. And now, standing in the rubble of the Karamazov family, you ask the question that has been haunting you since the first page. Is there any way out? Is there any cure for a soul that has split itself apart? Dostoevsky answers not with an argument, but with a person. His name is Alyosha. Alyosha is the third brother. He is the soul. While Dmitri rages and Ivan reasons, Alyosha simply shows up. He does not preach. He does not judge. He does not offer clever solutions to impossible problems. He listens. He stays. He loves. And in a novel filled with philosophical earthquakes and emotional firestorms, his quiet presence becomes the only stable ground. You have been taught your whole life that strength is loud, that power is force. That change comes from arguments won and battles fought. But Dostoevsky looks you in the eye and tells you that you have been deceived. The most powerful force in the universe, he says, is not an idea. It is not a weapon. It is not even faith. It is active love. And active love is terrifying because it requires everything from you and guarantees nothing in return. Consider what Alyosha does when Alyosha, the dying boy, is surrounded by his grieving friends. Alyosha does not deliver a sermon about the afterlife. He does not explain why God allows suffering. He sits with the boys. He weeps with them. He remembers their names. He asks about their lives. And in that simple act of presence, he plants a seed that will grow for the rest of their lives. Years later, standing at Alyosha's grave, these boys will remember not words, but a man who loved them when love was hard. This is the prescription. This is the path to resolution. It is not a system you can memorize or a formula you can apply. It is a way of being in the world that costs you everything. Dostoevsky illustrates this through a metaphor buried in the novel's most famous scene. It is the story of the onion. A woman dies and falls into the lake of fire. Her guardian angel searches for one good deed to save her and finds that once, long ago, she pulled an onion from her garden and gave it to a beggar. God tells the angel to lower that onion into the fire and let the woman climb out. She grasps it and begins to rise. But as she ascends, other sinners grab hold of her legs, hoping to be saved with her, and she, in her selfishness, kicks them away, screaming that the onion is hers. The onion breaks. She falls back into the fire. She is lost forever. The meaning cuts like a blade. Salvation is not a solo project. You cannot climb out of hell by yourself. The only thing that can save you is the one thing you cannot rationalize or demand, a gift given freely, with no guarantee of return. The onion is active love. It is small. It is fragile. It is easily broken by selfishness, but it is the only thing that bridges the abyss between one soul and another. You have experienced this. You know the moment when someone truly saw you, truly listened, truly stayed. You know how that felt like water in a desert. And you know the moments when you could have been that for someone else and chose instead to protect yourself. Dostoevsky is not asking you to be perfect. He is asking you to be present. He is asking you to pull the onion from your garden and give it away, even when you have nothing else, even when it seems pointless, even when the person you're giving it to may never thank you. But here is the terror embedded in the prescription. Active love requires faith, not faith in God necessarily, not faith in doctrine or dogma, faith in the unseen, faith in the possibility that your small act of presence matters, even when the evidence suggests otherwise. Faith that the boy you weep with today will carry that tear into his grave and be changed by it. Faith that love is real, even when the world screams that only power is real. This is the test Dostoevsky places before you. He has shown you the disease. He has shown you the consequences. He has offered you the cure. But the cure requires something from you that no book can give. It requires a choice to be like Alyosha in a world that worships Ivan, a choice to love when it is easier to reason, a choice to stay when it is easier to run. And just as you begin to feel the weight of that choice, just as you start to wonder if you are capable of it, Dostoevsky delivers his final truth. It is not spoken by a saint. It is spoken by a boy standing at a grave. It is the last line of the story, and it will haunt you for the rest of your life. It is the key that locks everything else into place. The grave is fresh. The boy Alyosha lies beneath the cold earth, another child sacrificed to the chaos of the Karamazov world. Around the grave stand a dozen boys, friends of the dead child, their faces streaked with tears and confusion. They have just lost someone they loved. They are staring into the abyss of mortality. And standing among them is Alyosha Karamazov, the soul of this story, the only brother who did not contribute to the destruction. You expect him to speak of heaven. You expect him to console them with promises of reunion, to wrap their grief in the comfortable blanket of religious certainty. But Alyosha does something far more radical. He tells them that they will never forget this moment. He tells them that the memory of Alyosha, of their love for him, of their tears at his grave, will become a sacred thing they carry forever. And then he speaks the words that contain the entire weight of Dostoevsky's revelation. Certainly, we shall all rise again. Certainly, we shall all see each other and gladly, joyfully tell each other everything that has happened. This is not a theological argument. It is not a proof of God's existence or a defense of the afterlife. It is something far more fragile and far more powerful. It is a declaration that love is stronger than death, because love creates the only immortality we can truly know, the immortality of being remembered, of mattering, of leaving a mark on another soul that time cannot erase. Dostoevsky has spent 500 pages dismantling every easy answer. He has let Ivan destroy faith with logic. He has let Dmitri disgrace it with passion. He has shown you a world where children suffer and fathers are murdered and the innocent are convicted. He has forced you to stare into the abyss and feel its cold breath on your face. And now, standing at a grave, he offers you not an answer to the problem of evil, but a way to live in spite of it. The ultimate truth of the Brothers Karamazov is this: you cannot solve the mystery of suffering. You cannot reason your way to God. You cannot argue yourself into goodness. But you can love. And in that love, you can create meaning that the abyss cannot touch. Look at what Alyosha does next. He does not lead these boys in a prayer. He does not recruit them for a cause. He joins hands with them. He makes them promise to remember this moment, to hold it sacred, to let it shape the rest of their lives. And then he sends them back into the world, not with answers, but with each other. The final image of this novel is not a solitary hero conquering darkness. It is a circle of children, holding hands, vowing to be good. This is the paradigm shift Dostoevsky demands from you. You have been trained to seek salvation in systems, in religions that promise heaven, in philosophies that promise clarity, in ideologies that promise utopia. But all of these systems are built by humans, and all of them crumble under the weight of human weakness. The only thing that does not crumble is the bond between one soul and another. The only thing that survives the grave is the love you gave and received. You will die. Everyone you love will die. Every achievement will turn to dust. Every argument will be forgotten. Every philosophy will be superseded. But the moments when you truly saw another person, truly stayed with them in their suffering, truly loved them without condition, those moments are eternal. Not because they earn you a ticket to paradise, but because they are the only things that make paradise worth wanting. This is why Dostoevsky wrote this book. Not to convert you to Russian Orthodoxy, not to defeat atheism in a debate, but to remind you, before you die, that you are not a machine. You are not a collection of desires and justifications. You are not a ghost in the dark. You are a soul, and your soul only lives when it touches another soul. The Karamazov family destroyed itself because each member lived alone. Dmitri lived in his body. Ivan lived in his mind. The father lived in his appetites. Smerdyakov lived in his resentment. Only Alyosha lived in connection. Only Alyosha understood that the self is not a fortress to be defended, but a door to be opened. So here is your final question, the one you must answer long after this video ends and the screen goes dark. Who will you be in this story? Will you be Ivan, locked in the prison of your own cleverness, arguing with a devil of your own making? Will you be Dmitri, burning through life and leaving ash in your wake? Will you be the father, empty and performing, mistaking noise for existence? Or will you be Alyosha? Will you show up? Will you stay? Will you love when it costs you everything and guarantees you nothing? Will you take the hand of the person next to you and vow to be good? Not because you have proof it matters, but because the alternative is a world where children die alone and no one remembers their names? The grave is waiting. The abyss is real, but so is the hand in yours. So is the tear on your cheek. So is the memory of everyone who ever loved you. Dostoevsky has given you the key. The door is open. The only question left is whether you will walk through it.